Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Exploring Sacred. And this is your host, Denise Iwaniw Francisco. This evening, we're going to explore mysticism. We're going to explore modern day mysticism and touch on ancient mysticism and how the worlds blend and how do we walk between the worlds as a modern day mystic. And what does that mean anyway? So with that, welcome to the show, everyone. Hey, Katie Battle. Hello, Rob. It's good to have you with me. And as we begin, I'm going to go ahead and share the show in a couple of other places so that it's easier for folks to find me. I think that's pretty important. I think it's very important, actually. All right. Hey, good evening, Marianne. It's good to see you in the chat room. Thank you to those that are sharing the show. I appreciate that if you so desire to do that. I want to make sure that I received many notes from my show Tuesday. That was yesterday, saying, Dana, we couldn't find you. Where were you? We couldn't, grasp where you were. So I am going to take care of that right now, right up front, so that we can all be together. I think that that's a good place to be. Okay, there we are. Good. Hey, Jan Francisco. It's good to see you. So for those of you that are in the Sacred Cup School of Divinity group site, hello. It's good to be with you again this evening. And those of you at the Temple Within School of Sacred Studies group, it's great to see you. And of course, here on Exploring Sacred. And I'm celebrating 18 years, as some of you know, here at the Temple Within and the Temple Within Publishing and Media. Hard to believe it's been 18 years. I was talking to my friend Darlene earlier today, who also happens to be my financial planner, advisor, all that good kind of a thing. And she said, Dee, it's hard to believe it's been 18 years. But yes, the Temple Within Publishing, Media, and School of Sacred Studies was launched in the year 2000, right now at that time, actually. So thank you all for celebrating with me and having retired Balancing Heaven and Earth and brought to life Exploring Sacred. And we're going to do that this evening. We're going to explore the sacredness of being a mystic and a modern day mystic, as a matter of fact. But hello, Betty. It's good to see you. Hey, Rosalind. It's good to see you too. Hey, Lisa. It's great to see you. And Lisa, I hope that you saw my message to you in the inbox through the show with regard to your question about my thoughts on Doreen Virtue at this time and the changes going on with her as well. So thank you for all of that, for bringing a really great question to light. And so I hope that you have read my answer. All right. Oh, looking. Hello, Holly. Hello, Catherine. It's good to see everybody. Rosalind, I hope that you're feeling better. Don't do that anymore. No more trips in the ambulance, please. No more of that. Rose and I, we go back a really long way. And one of the most funny evenings of my life, one of those evenings, where you laugh until it absolutely hurts, happened between she and I at a wedding of all places. And, a sense of humor is something she definitely has. And that is something that we share in common. And we both have pickles. We both have kind of that same sort of warped sense of humor, a very dry sense of humor, I guess you could say. And laughter is a good thing. Humor is a very good thing. I just received a note from my sister, Del Marie, who is watching the Fort Robinson spiritual runners, as they are in the council chambers right now on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. So my hat's off, and my heart is going out to all of the runners from the Northern Cheyenne people. Well, it's actually grown beyond the Northern Cheyenne people to include so many tribal members from all across Native North America who make their way at this time of the year from Fort Robinson, Nebraska, all the way up to Busby, Montana, by way of Ogallala, South Dakota, which was one of the very first stops back in the 1800s when Chief Dull Knife liberated his people from the camps there at the fort. So blessings to all of those spiritual runners that are running for their ancestors and running for ancestral healing from trauma. So Gathering Thunder Foundation is always delighted to be a part of the Fort Robinson spiritual run. Always delighted. I've been there for many, many years. This is the first year in a long time that I've not been there. And I'm kind of itchy about that, not being with the kids. Hello, Judy. Hey, Tracy Civic, you birthday girl, you. It's good to see you in the house. Marilyn Lewis, Judy. It's good to see you. So tonight we're going to talk about mysticism, and we're going to talk about modern day mysticism. There's a lot of theory around mystics and around mysticism. And really it depends on the path perhaps that you were raised in, perhaps a particular religious tradition, maybe without a religious tradition. And sometimes when the word mystic or mysticism crops up, oftentimes it raises an eyebrow. Sometimes it brings a shake of the head. Sometimes it brings disdain. Often it brings intrigue. What is that? What is mysticism? What is a mystic? Didn't they die a long time ago? I've heard people ask that question as well. Mystics, isn't that something that the Bible wrote about, 2,000 years ago? All of those kind of things. So as we enter into this evening's discussion about modern day mysticism, I invite you all to breathe during the course of our time together this evening. I may say some things or posit some things that test your balance, maybe rattle your cage, or maybe bring you to a place of remembrance, a place of, oh, yeah, now I understand. Whatever it happens to be, I feel that at this time, it's a really, really good place to talk about this subject matter. And I'm so glad that all of you are with me. Thank you for sharing the show, those of you that are so inclined. Mysticism, in my own mindset, happens to be the practice of trying to understand the great mystery. There are many great mysteries in my mind. There are great mysteries surrounding the great mystery. Some call that great mystery Wakantanka, the great holiness. Wakan, holy, right? Tonka, big, large, the large holiness, the great mystery of all things. Some people consider that the great mystery is what is, who is, how is. When did it become? Is everything the great mystery? Am I part of the great mystery, or am I separate from that? Does the great mystery only reside in the human condition, or does it reside within all living things, including the stars, the cosmos, the galaxies, the universes within the universes? To me, mystics of old and modern day mystics, you and I, have an unquenchable thirst that says, search further. And the further we search, the more we come to understand that the further we need to search. To me, it seems that mysticism and being a mystic really is a quest. It's a grand quest. It's an adventure into self-realization, self-understanding. And ultimately, for me, I believe the understanding or the realization of the teaching of Mitakoye Oyasin, Mitakuyasin, we are all related. Many of you that are watching me have known for a long, long time that you're slightly different, maybe very different than your family members, your colleagues, your friends. And maybe that feeling different has you isolated at times, feeling lonely at other times, feeling alone at other times. I call those mystic symptoms of being a mystic. Being a mystic is a different walk of life. And it doesn't exclude us from having our 9-to-5 job, being moms and dads, caretaking for our four-leggeds. 2 of my four-leggeds are right here in the room with me. It doesn't exclude us from living a human life with all of the foibles, the high highs and the low lows of being human. It means that in addition to those things, there are unanswered questions. There are inklings in our soul. There is a pull that not everybody understands, and that's okay. Not everyone is going to understand. That can be the cause of great consternation for a lot of people. And we're going to talk about that. Good evening, Robin. Rob, he says, different, isolated me? Yes, absolutely. It is good to have you back too, Judy. Thank you. Hello, Robin. The life of a mystic. The life of a mystic can often be misunderstood. And let's go back to, hello, Alexandria. What a great name. Thank you for being here this evening. A mystic, it was once thought, and is still thought by a lot of people, that mystics only lived during the medieval times. Maybe some of them lived during the time of the Old Testament. Maybe there were a few prior to that in Hinduism and Buddhism. But mostly, I believe that when people think of the word mystic, they probably think of Padre Pio. They may think of Paramahansa Yogananda. They may think of Teresa of Avila, Teresa of Lisieux. The list goes on and on and on. And in modern day, perhaps they might think of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And there are others. There are countless others. But there's still a misnomer that mystics only lived during the time of castles and dungeons, the time of the Crusades, of the Inquisition. And while it is true that many mystics of old during those times found themselves sometimes burned at the stake, sometimes rolled over, right, crushed in all of those horrible horrors, many mystics simply went underground and the teachings continued. And the teachings continued in many ways that a lot of people don't quite understand, the way that the teachings were continued on. In the teachings that come through the tarot, for instance, that's just one of them. The teachings that have been discovered more recently in Qumran, right there in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, the Dead Sea Scrolls. We've of late been able to get a hold of some of the Gospels of the Essenes that were hidden away, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Mary, but who wrote those? And where did all of those mystics from that time go? Well, a lot of them went underground, they went away, or they simply were, but they didn't speak about it. And it's amazing today how many people I meet that very much have a connection to spirit, unlike perhaps others in their circle of friends and family, but they don't speak about it because they're not quite certain what the reaction is going to be. To me, the mystic has a thirst, an absolute thirst that can only be quenched by communion with or ecstatic union with the one, with all things. And I don't believe that there's a certain marker in time that went away. Years and years and years ago, I guess it was a long decades ago, we can say now, we can say decades ago. When I was 15 years old, and you've heard me tell this story many times, having a conversation with my priest at the time as I was getting ready to make my Catholic confirmation, and talking to Father about why it is that I am able to see spirit. What do I mean by I'm able to see spirit? What does that mean anyway, Denise, when you say that? Why is it that I have this ability, or call it what you will, this ability to see those that have left their physical body and yet are very much alive in their non-physical body? How is it that I'm able to see angels, Father? How can I do this? And he was looking at me, and he could tell by the tone of my voice and the urgency in me that what I was asking him was a very real question. And I looked at him asking the question. In his face, I could see the seriousness coming over him. And a man who was typically very gruff, anybody who knew Father Cussler in the 70s knew that he didn't mess around. He just didn't. Father Cussler was a serious dude. Except in that moment, he and I in the church, lights are dim. He had just cleaned up the altar. And he looked at me, calling me by my Catholic confirmation names that I had chosen. Catherine Therese, he said, what you are talking about, your ability to see people who have passed on from the earthly plane to the spirit plane, and your ability to see beings that we call angels, is a charismatic gift. It is a gift of the charismata, the charisms. In other words, active gifts of the spirit. And he said to me, you must remember, Catherine Therese, that not all spirit is good. Not all of it is light and angelic. Some of it is very, very dark, but you'll grow into that. You'll come to understand that. Well, I already understood that. I think he just didn't want to go there with me. And I was happy for that, because in that moment, he then said to me, he revealed to me that he was an ordained exorcist. And he patted my hand and he said, one day, Catherine Therese, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. Well, I had already had glimpses into what he was talking about. Hearing the voices in the living room when there was no one home. Hearing music playing when there was no one playing music. Visitations at my bedside, visitations hovering above me, even as a very small girl. When I was like 5, 6 years old, while my dad was stationed in Vietnam, he was doing a tour of duty in Vietnam, and I was 6 years old, first grade. And that is my very first vivid recollection of seeing people that other people could not see. And it was scary for me because my dad wasn't there. He was away at war. It wasn't until much later, decades later, that I came to understand. There's something about a mystic, somebody who searches in the mystery, somebody who wears the mystery, somebody who has ceremony in the mystery, somebody born to walk with the mystery, is that we exude a little bit of a different light in what some people call an aura, some people call a spirit body. Some people call a light body. I call it my solar body, SOULAR. That's my moniker for it. That says to those on the other side that are very much alive, but not inhabiting physicality, Denise can see, Dana can see, she can smell, she can hear, she can taste, she can feel. And so like moths to a light, those on the other side that see our light are drawn to us for a variety of reasons. A variety of reasons. I'm going to look in the... Hello, Pam Hemis. Hey, Terry Ruel. Love Terry Ruel. An amazing woman. For those of you that are watching and you went through Catholic catechism and you picked out your saint's name, you know, we all had to pick a saint's name to be named after, right? We wanted to carry a certain name. Think about that. Think about the importance of your name. Our name is sacred. It's very sacred. The ancient Hebrews, the Hebrew mystics, and by the way, there are mystics in every tradition and spiritual pathway. They may not call themselves mystics. They can be the seers. They can be the holy men, the holy women, the shamans. Again, they walk a different life. Their thirst to be with, to walk with, to educate others sometimes to the great mystery sets them apart. For those of you that went through Catholic catechism, think about the name that you chose and why. Why would you choose that name? I chose the name Catherine after Catherine of Siena, a wonderful church seer and mystic. Somebody who thirsted consciously and always for union with spirit, to understand her origins and to see those origins in every living thing and to understand what that life force was that flowed through everything. The web, the weave, as Amantha Murphy said. Why did you choose that name? My parents wanted me to have the name Teresa. I did not want it, and yet I ended up with Teresa. So it was Catherine Therese is what we went with, but both church mystics. One of the things when we talk about mystics of old, whether we're talking about Siddhartha Gautama, also known as the Buddha, or any of the Christian mystics or Hebrew mystics that we think about, sometimes we think about them living in caves, them living at the top of mountains, eschewing everything in their life that is material to go without. Some having a vow of poverty, living in conditions that were austere. Not to say that there aren't mystics in these days that do that very same thing. But back a long time ago, when you moved yourself away from the material, it was one of the very best ways back in the day, when you could find yourself cloistered. You could go to a cloister, to a convent, to a monastery, to a mountaintop, to a cave in Qumran, or other places around the world in Nepal, Bhutan, to be alone, to be holy in your isolation of holiness, with maybe a candlestick, maybe a small altar, maybe your holy book beside you, maybe nothing at all, but nature. Beautiful nature. But for me, the most amazing cathedral of all, Mother Nature. Austerity, simplicity, and in some cases, self-flagellation, inflicting pain, going outside of the physical body, removing ourselves outside of the physical body without the ability to feel physical pain because of the ability to step in and out of the body. Many forms of prayer. Some of that still goes on today. I'm going to take a look here in the... Holly is saying, I chose Kateri Tekakwitha. Yes. Before, yes, she was a saint. Yes, she's been made a saint. She is the only Native American saint. Kateri Tekakwitha. Rosalind is saying mine is Teresa. Oh, Tracy Civic, also Teresa. Hey, CJ. Yeah, Teresa. Interesting that we all chose the name of church mystics, of church seers. Very, well, I guess not too interesting, is it really, when you think about it? I remember years ago being at the newspaper, and one of my colleagues happened to come from a very fundamental church background, very fundamental. And she always thought I was kind of different anyway because of the abilities that I have, the gifts that I have that are just different than hers. There's nothing extraordinary about my gift. It's just different than a lot of other people, the same with all of you. Our gift of communing with spirit, of being with spirit, of wanting to be with spirit. It's not even a want, it's a necessity, is it not? I think it's fair to say that for those of us that are modern day mystics, it's not a want, it's a necessity. It's a necessity to go sit by a tree, to be by a river, to be in prayer, contemplation, sweat lodge, church, synagogue, whatever it happens to be. Anyway, she and I got on this conversation. Hey, Lady Hawk. Yeah. She got on a conversation. We got into a conversation together about mysticism. And she said, well, you know what happened? Everything was just ruined in the world because of mystics. Especially you Catholic mystics, she said to me. I was like, ooh, she's getting way up on that horse of hers. Okay, I just want to hear this. This is going to be good. I said, what do you mean? Especially us Catholic mystics. Well, you couldn't just be with the status quo. You just couldn't understand that what we were being told by our elders was all we needed to know. No, the mystics just had to go out and do other things. And they were corrupted. All mystics were corrupted. I said, what do you mean by that? She could tell I was getting just a little bit hot under the collar, my Catholic mystic collar. And she said, mystics are a bunch of charlatans. I said, well, you're confusing mystics with Sister Chloe or whoever she is on 1-800 dial a psychic. There's a difference. What is the difference between 1-800 dial a psychic and a mystic? In my mind, as Sister Irene Mary always said to me, I love Irene Mary. One day, Irene Mary and I were having a little cup of coffee, or I was on lunch break. So she was having a beer and I was having a cup of coffee. And we were on this subject of Sister Chloe versus a mystic and the gifts of the Spirit. And I said, Sister, in your mind, what is the difference between me and Sister Chloe, or whatever her name was? I can't remember. She said, well, for me, one of the things that is markedly different is that a mystic understands that the work that's being done is soul work. A mystic understands that every living thing has a soul. It's greater than the sum total of its physical incarnation. It has a soul, and that soul is divine. The mystic, when doing their work out of love, out of a loving place, sees beyond the physical and into the soul of every living thing that is seen and unseen. The difference is love. The difference is understanding soul, and that when you are with somebody sharing your gifts of the Spirit or educating them to their gifts of the Spirit, you are talking not only to them human to human, but you're talking to their soul. And always remember this. You're doing soul work. And the soul is precious. And the soul can be shattered. And sometimes a shattered soul cannot be put back together in a single lifetime. Cannot be put back together. And I said, well, I'm not certain that I really want to do that work because that's a whole lot of responsibility. I guess that's what Father Cussler was talking to me about when I was 15. One day, Catherine Therese, you're going to understand these gifts, but try to be a teenager because you're going to come to understand the responsibility that comes with the gifts. I happen to believe that no matter what our gift happens to be, and there are so many gifts, aren't there? And as Hafiz, I love Hafiz. What a beautiful mystic Hafiz is. Sufi mystic. I love the Sufi mystics. Love, love, love. Love. My neurologist is a Sufi. I love that I have a neurologist who's a Sufi. And when I go to see my neurologist, he delights me in his understanding, as he says it in his own words. When I'm with you, Denise, I know that I am treating your mystical brain and I am treating your physical brain. How's that for a modern day doctor who understands the modern day mystic? Muhammad Farooq is his name. For those of you that are wondering, what's the name of the neurologist who is a Sufi who understands a modern day mystic? Muhammad Farooq at the Hauenstein Center here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's not the only one. Word is spreading that the mystics are no longer all underground. Some of us, I think, are perhaps Cathars that have come back into modern day mysticism. Well, that's a whole other show, isn't it? But back to soul work. Whether you are an artist, whether you are a social worker, whatever you happen to be doing, whether you are a mason laying bricks and creating buildings, you are responsible for the integrity of your work. We all are. The modern day mystic works in a world that very few have a full glimpse of. And this is where integrity is a must. Integrity is a must. And as Irene told me that day, many years ago, Dana, the soul is so precious. Always remember that and take care of your own soul as well. A lot of conversations about that. I need to have a little look-see. Yes, Rob is saying Islamic mystics have traditionally had a great love of the sciences. I was floored when I met Muhammad Farooq, and he had a student in with him, and he looked at his student and he said, I want you to understand this about my patient, Denise. And I give him credit because he read my book, that would be the doctor, read my book, Embracing the Mystic Within. That was written at the behest of Sister Irene Mary. Will you please, Denise, write a book for people that are trying to understand the mystic within themselves, that part of them that is longing for understanding, not only of things that go bump in the night, but those things that arrive in the night to comfort. Those things that arrive after the loss of someone we love, those signs and wonders that appear at any given time. Will you please write a book to help people understand? Well, Muhammad Farooq read the book, and he turned around and he looked at his intern who was diligently writing on his pad of paper. And he said, understand that when we treat Denise, we are treating two parts of her brain, the mystical part of her brain and the physical part of her brain. They're both engaging at all times. And I'll never forget the look on the intern's face. It was one of those where the glasses kind of slip down and they look over he said, we'll talk about that later, but for now, he said, we need to nourish both sides of your brain. And he wasn't just talking left hemisphere and right hemisphere. He was talking about that. Okay, let me see here. Thank you so much for listening to the sister. Well, thank you, CJ. You know, you're a modern day mystic. Everybody you're listening right now, you're a modern day mystic. You're wondering, what's the mystery? How do I belong with the mystery? Is the mystery only for a select few, or is it for us all? I happen to believe at greater and lesser degrees, because some people are not quite as adventurous as others, right? Some of us dive so far into the mystery, there are times we need to be reeled back from it. Any of you out there like that? Right? That's where we need to have friends that are solidly on grandmother earth, right? That help us have a balance between heaven and earth. Yeah. When I first met my spiritual director at the Dominican Center, Charmaine, if you're watching, I love you. Charmaine kind of saved my life, to be quite honest. And as I was getting ready this morning to meet with my first client, I found something that Charmaine sent to me in 1996. I found it in my library downstairs. Brilliant. Isaiah. Came out of Isaiah. And the teaching that came out from Isaiah, the one that she wrote to me, was about a new day dawning. About a new day dawning. It's another aspect to being a mystic, is that we're always drawn forward We look back, we may glance from side to side, but the mystic is always drawn forward. Even as we're looking at antiquity, we're always being drawn forward into, and not into the abyss, but into the mystery. And we come to understand that the mystery is always leading us to a new day. The mystery presents itself in meetings that some would say are happenstance. I happen to think that everything is in divine order, even when I don't want it to be in divine order. The great mystery reveals itself in small meetings, in short meetings. The divine mystery reveals itself to us when we're out in nature and we can feel ourselves one with nature, not separate from. The great mystery reveals itself in our dreams, our night dreams and our daydreams. I happen to believe that this life that we're living is a dream, that we're always dreaming. I happen to believe that we are creator, dreaming and expressing, informing, right, the heart and mind of all of existence, because existence, the galaxies, the cosmos, the universes are always expanding, which means we're expanding. I love that. The mystic understands that as new stuff, those same universes, planets, and galaxies are also revealing themselves within us. It makes us itchy. It makes us know that there's a stirring on the inside, and it sets us about looking deeper, which sometimes means it takes us into looking deeper and into the darker, into the inkier. The dark night of the soul, some people call it. Some people refer to it as the little deaths without dying. There in the halls of Amenti in Egypt. I was talking about this yesterday on my morning show. The hall of Amenti is real. It's on the etheric level. It's on the spiritual level. There are times in the life of a modern day mystic when we need to not only take off the masks that we've been wearing, because we tend to do that in our immaturity or in our beginning of learning. We wear all of these masks, and then finally we decide that those masks are just too heavy to bear. They're too heavy a burden to bear. I don't want to wear those any longer. I'm just going to be me. And when we decide we're just going to be me, no more masks, then the question is, well, who am I really? Who am I really? And yet another path is set upon at that point. I remember Charmaine saying to me, I was 30 years old at the time, so it was a few years ago. I said to her, well, Charmaine, mystics, I've always been fascinated by them. And she looked at me and she said, Denise, mystics haven't gone anywhere. Maybe they haven't been written about in a really long time, but people such as yourself exist everywhere, and they are called by different names. Mystics have always been, and mystics will always be. Well, now that was the first time that anybody had said that to me. I was 30 years old. I had very young children, a toddler and a baby. And I was thirsting. I was questing. For what's next. Take a look here. Sometimes I feel like I'm learning things that I used to know at another time, but need teachers to help me remember. Kind of a weird feeling. There is such a gift in serving as someone's spiritual director. Yes, absolutely. Yes, Janice is a spiritual director, a Dominican spiritual director. Yes. Sometimes we are reminded. And sometimes as modern day mystics, we help remind one another. We help one another remember that there's a lot of ignorance about mysticism. Even, my coworker, Mystics were charlatans. In other words, mystics wouldn't just swallow the pill and say that's all there is because that's what I was told all there is. No, mystics back then and mystics right now know that there's something more than what we're being told exoterically. Esoterically and intrinsically, we know there's more to this rodeo than what I'm seeing right now. And sometimes we've always known. Sometimes mystics are born. Sometimes mystics reveal. Some are just born. I think I came out of the chute this way. I'm pretty sure that I did. And others gradually become. I love the idea that Paramahansa Yogananda said about saying in self-realization, realizing the fullness of self. The fullness of self. Or one of my favorite modern day mystics, Hamid Bey, Coptic master Hamid Bey, used to say, a master is the one who is awake. I also happen to believe that a mystic is the one who is awake or awakening. And the master, unlike the guru, is human and admittedly is continuing to grow. I believe that the mystic is very similar in that. The mystic is always growing. Sometimes in that growth, it means that we are growing away from. We can grow away from situations, people, thought forms, communities as we grow. And that's okay. It's necessary. Very few mystics stay stagnant. Sometimes it finds them very individualized. Right? We don't see too many eagles flying around in a flock, and that's okay. I want to check out the chat room. Yeah. Socrates argued that is the only way to learn. Yeah, that whole only thing, right? Only. Oh my goodness. Rob is saying, you want me to believe what you tell me? How about tell you? Okay, that changes real quick. Yes. And that's the importance of being educated. Being educated about the many walks of life. When Dr. Farouk said to me that he understood, I looked at him and I said, you're a Sufi, aren't you? And he looked at me and he said, I am a Sufi. How did you know that? I said, I can feel it. I can feel it about you. And he said, I am a Sufi. I come from a very long line of Sufis. I said, I can feel that joy. I can feel that ecstatic joy, ecstatic union with spirit. It's not always ecstatic. Sometimes your butt feels like it's dragging. That's also part of it. But there is a part of mysticism that brings about a union, an ecstatic union that we cannot have very rarely here on the physical plane. It's something that goes beyond that. It's a union of soul. And you know what I'm talking about. So fast forward to the year 2006. 2006. Again, I'm a hockey mom. I'm a busy chick working at the newspaper. I've got the temple within is cooking. I'm publishing books. This is all going on. And I find myself at an inipi, a sweat lodge here in West Michigan. And as I was preparing to go into the inipi, the sweat lodge, the holy man that was visiting from the reservation looked at me and he said, before anyone else goes into that inipi, I need to speak to you. And it was the way that he said it that I knew, I feel like my life is about to change. That's an understatement. And I went into the NEP, and Tara, if you're in the chat room, you can weigh in because Tara, you were there with me that evening. And he looked at me. I was recovering from having a left brain stroke. I was just at a place where I could really walk with confidence. I was regaining my speech more fully. And he looked at me, and I'd never met this man, and he said, "What you have is a gift." And I looked at him, and he said, "For most of your life, you feel as though you've carried a curse. But what you have is a gift." And I just looked at him. He said, your ability to see the spirits know that you can see them. And when you went blind in your right eye, spirit was right there with you. And I said, how did you know that I went blind in my right eye? He said, well, isn't that how you knew that something was wrong? I said, it is, but how did you know that? And he laughed. He said, because the spirits told me. What you have is a gift. And even if other people have made you feel as though it's a curse or it's not right, it's a gift from Wakantanka, from the Tankashilas that you've been given. And now I'm going to teach you the ways. And I said, I really think I'm too busy for that. I mean, I got a lot going on. And he looked at me and he said, Spirit told me that I'm to begin teaching you the ways of your ancestors. So I'm going to begin teaching you. And I didn't know what to say, but my soul was saying, here you go again. What I didn't know, and what many of us don't know, are in those moments when our soul says, you knew this was coming. You knew you were going to be brought to this place and your life is about to change. And it's about to change in ways that we didn't prepare you for because you wouldn't have been here this evening. I know you all know exactly what I'm talking about. That moment comes in many ways. And for me, it was looking into his very dark brown face and his very dark brown eyes. And he said, this evening inside the inipi, you'll understand more. My daughter happened to be there with me that night. She was 12, 13 years old at the time. 13. And she was in the inipi that night when the spirits came to visit. Right out loud. She had never heard them quite out loud like that. Denise, you're receiving your spirit name. Your Indian name is coming to you this evening. Do you understand? I understand. Your name is Blue Thunder Woman because you can see Blue Thunder Woman. You're a thunder dreamer, Blue Thunder Woman. That is your name. Do you understand? Wakian Towi, do you understand? Your ancestors are here to teach you about the old ways. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. And I looked at my daughter, Elise, and her eyeballs were this big around, and all I could see were the whites of her eyes with this discarnate figure talking very loudly. What I didn't know is I was hearing it in English. Everyone else in the Inipi heard it in the Lakota language. Nobody heard it in the English language except for me and my daughter. No one else knew what was being said. And that was the night that the path began. The path doesn't have to be either or, by the way. You cannot erase who you've been. You cannot erase what's made you who you are. That's part of being the mystic in the modern day. We're not in little clumps and groups of people any longer, for the most part. There are places in the world where the little clans that have always been are still there, just as they've always been. In the modern world, the clan, the tribe has mixed. It's blended. Paths have blended. And in the mixing and the blending and the exploring, we become. It doesn't have to be an either or in the modern day. I cannot erase the fact that I grew up Catholic. I cannot erase the fact that I have pretty fair skin. I cannot erase the fact that I have green eyes. And so the first time that I went to the reservation, and I was inside my very first inipi with other Wakam, Wichasha Wakan, other holy men and women, and they were giggling. They were testing me. We all get tested, don't we? In different ways. They were all testing me and they were chatting about me. And when we were all done, and I said, so what was so funny to everyone? Why were they laughing? And he looked at me and he said, they wondered why I brought Snow White here to the reservation and why I'm teaching Snow White. these ways. Why I'm preparing you to carry that pipe. I said, why are you doing that? He said, because Spirit brought us together and Spirit has plans. Again, it was one of those moments where, do I go with my soul's plan or do I fight it? And I was at an age where I said, well, we're going. I don't know where I'm going, but my soul is taking me there. Charmaine and I had lunch a couple of months ago. I hadn't seen her in years, 2 decades. And she looked at me very teary-eyed and she said, tell me about all of the people in your life that you've lost along the way. Tell me about how your life has changed, because no one walks a spiritual path without loss, without losing people that don't understand, without losing people that want you to remain the same, without losing people that aren't supposed to go along on the mystic's journey with you. Tell me about that. She said, I've watched your career for 20 years now. She said, I've watched. I've heard. Congratulations. And at the same time, she said, my heart is really heavy and really sad for you because I know your losses must be heavy. I said, sometimes they're very heavy. And sometimes the joy outweighs any sort of heaviness because I know that life in human form is very short, Charmaine. The ecstatic joy of my soul's journey. There are no words, and I know you all know what I mean. There are certain losses for the mystic that most people don't understand because most people don't understand the journey of the mystic, of the modern day mystic. We're no longer cloistered, all of us. We're not all in convents and monasteries, in caves in Qumran and Bhutan. We're living our lives. We're with the people. We're with nature. We're understanding the multidimensionality of our lives, of all of our lives, that I believe are being lived simultaneously. For some people, that's kind of when I say that, their eyes kind of glaze over, like, oh, there she goes with that idea again. And I've always said to myself, in those moments of change, the winds of change, not so much loss as change. And with change, in the end, it's all together again, isn't it? We're all together again in the end. Momentary loss. Momentary loss. Really, life is the blink of an eye, is it not? It is. Momentary loss. In the end, when we're all together and celebrating the hero's journey with one another, yeah. But you know what I mean in our humanness, that feeling of, do I allow my soul to live, or do I let my soul die for the comfort of others? Do I allow my soul to wither and shrivel and die so that others don't have to grow? Do I allow my soul to die so that others don't have to do their work? Or do I allow my soul to grow and follow the path of my soul lovingly and love others where they happen to be, where they're supposed to be, where they're allowed to be? The modern day mystic eventually comes to the realization that the soul path is an individual path, and yet we're all souls. And I love how Ram Dass put this, walking each other home. We are all just walking each other home. I believe that. I'm going to check here. Hi, Ronnie. Hi, Ronnie. I don't think I've heard that story before, Dana. Thank you for sharing. You're welcome, Pamela Hemis. You're welcome. We all go through those momentary losses. I remember years ago, an old family friend of mine, she said to me, one thing I've noticed about you since you were a young girl is that you don't seem much bothered by death. And I said, well, it's not that I'm not bothered by death. I just have an understanding that death is actually a beginning. And she looked at me. What do you mean by that? And I said, well, I happen to believe that this physical life is just fleeting. Came here to do what we came here to do. Came here to learn even further about all of existence. Now we get to know when we go home, everybody, when we finally go home with capital H, we can all sit around with one another, if that's what you do, if that's what we choose to do, let me just say, and talk about coming to understand the gift of human life. Not just life in our soul body or life in the universal mind of love and light, but wow, wasn't that a ride? Wasn't that a ride? It's a ride, and I choose to ride. Some people choose to kind of stand on the sides, and that's fine too. Not everyone is going to understand your walk as a modern day mystic. I remember Sister Mairead from Ireland saying to me, she said, my father told me before he passed that I no longer had to be bound to living in a convent. This was several years ago, speaking to her for the very first time she was calling from Ireland. He said, I don't have to be cloistered any longer, Denise. She said, I believe that for 3 lifetimes in a row now, I've been a cloistered nun. I know it's been at least 3 lifetimes in a row now. And I said, Sister Mairead, boy, that's not a conversation I've ever had with a nun. Not even Sister Irene Mary. And she chuckled and she said, oh my goodness, she said, the old mysteries, the old teachings are still alive on this side of the pond, my dear. Not all of them made it across the pond and into the new world. Well, it's not really a new world, but you know what I mean. Across on the Mayflower is what she was saying with the Puritans. No, they certainly didn't. And a lot of that has been perpetuated. And now the perpetuation of it is being tested. It's being dismissed. There's a new light that is dawning. It's a mystical light. It's a mystical light, hopefully with integrity. Not everyone is going to understand your path. Not everyone is going to understand your quest, your thirst, your need for time of contemplation, of prayer, of meditation, of ceremony, whatever that is for you. Wherever it is that you find God, wherever it is that you find Creator, wherever it is that you find the oneness with all things. Not everybody believes in a Creator. Not everybody believes that. We all have our own way of trying to understand. Some people, it's not in their lifetime to even try to understand that, and that's okay too. As Sister Mairead said to me, Denise, I'm kind of excited because I no longer have to be in the convent. I get to do my work out in the streets and with the people. She said, I think I might be moving to Boston. I said, well, I think that's a wonderful place for you to move to Boston, especially for an Irish nun. I think it's a marvelous place for you to be, Mairead. And she said, I'm so happy. She said, I believe that we can do the Creator's work without being in a convent. I said, well, I'll take it a step further, Mairead. I think we can do the Creator's work or the work of Creator or the work of our light and our gifts and talents without wearing a habit, without wearing a collar. I think we do our work by just being good people, loving one another, sharing our gifts and talents. I think that's it. And I believe that we all can do our work outside of the convent and the monastery. And the greatest work I believe that we can do is to hold each other in a place of understanding that we're all related. And what we do to ourselves, we do to another, and vice versa. I really believe that, Mairead. And she said, oh my goodness, Denise, I do hope you and I get to meet one day. To this day, I've not met Mairead. I hope one day that I get the opportunity to do that when I'm out in Boston, because she does now live on the East Coast. And oh, and by the way, from what I understand, she's met a lovely gentleman. A lovely gentleman. And we can do the work of our soul in relationship, in right relationship. The modern day mystic needs to honor the path. We need to honor our body, this temple that we've been given, treat it well, understand that everyone is walking within their own temple, and that within their temple, whether it has 4 legs or feathers or fur or scales or bark or petals, everyone is incarnated on this earth, but everything, I believe, is a spark of Creator. And when we can see that, that's one of those Mother Teresa moments, isn't it? But a lot of mystics have that moment. They've been trying to teach us. It's now our turn, everybody, to carry that torch. And thank goodness we all don't have to self-flagellate anymore, right? We don't have to be, unless we want to be in a cave. We can be out with people. We can be snow sledding. We can be laughing. We can be doing what it is that we do in our humanness, in sweat lodge, synagogue, mosque, temple, under a tree. None of the above. How do you love really is the question. How do you love? How do you love? If it's true that the ancient mystic was on a quest to ecstatic union with love, the ultimate love, then isn't it then in the modern day our quest for ecstatic union with the love and the light that we see in one another, seen and unseen? Not everyone is going to get that right away. And that's okay. Keep doing what it is that you do. Keep doing what it is that you do. Loving the Creator without and the Creator within every living thing. That's big. Doesn't require a church. Doesn't require a temple, a synagogue. It doesn't require any building here on the earth plane. Although those are great meeting places for a lot of people. Those are great meeting places. Doesn't require having a sweat lodge or inipie either. But that's a great place to pray for me. With that, everyone, I honor your path as a modern day mystic. Understand that not everyone is going to understand that in the ultimate end. Do you understand it? And what is it that you're trying to understand? And understand that there is nothing that you can do in this lifetime that separates you from the love from which you came. Nothing. The love from which you came walks with you now. You carry it within you. And one day, you will return to that love and to that light. The modern day mystic, the mystic of old, understood that. Isn't it a beautiful thing that we get to help others understand that just by being who we are? With that, everyone, shine your light, shine it bright. The world needs it. The world needs it. Blessings be, everyone. Have a beautiful evening.